In 1858, the East Indian Company's rule of India transferred to the British Crown during Queen Victoria's regime. This film focused upon the British impact on India and if the British development of the country did more harm than good in India.
The British exploited India by taking care of themselves and their own needs first. They didn't treat the Indians as slaves, but they primarily just thought about themselves, and a lot of the British people lived in India because it was cheaper than living in Britain. They were also there because they took over the factories to earn money. The economy was the main reason for the British interest in India. They also developed India by bringing technology and culture the Indian didn't use or understand. They brought cars and taught them how to speak English, and every time a new technology was invented, they probably brought it to India. The attitude the white people had back then towards the Indians was very condescending. They thought that they were better than the Indians, and they had better technology than the Indians, so they saw themselves as advanced people more than the natives.
Racism was not so bad in India compared to Africa. The British just saw the natives as housekeepers and farmers, while in Africa the natives were made slaves and sold as a product you could use however you liked. For example, between 1780 and 1785, before the British soldiers brought their wives with them, it was common that they married Indian women. But in the 1830s and 40s, the British men began bringing their wives, and intermingling between the races stopped. Then it became unpleasant to see a British soldier with an Indian woman. The short story Karma is about Sir Mohanlal, who was a middle-aged man who worked in India during the British Raj. He was ashamed to be Indian, and hence he tried to speak in English or in anglicized Hindustani, and to dress as a high-ranked British official. He used to fill the crossword puzzles of English newspapers, which he did to show his immense knowledge in English. His wife Lakshmi was a traditional Indian woman, and due to this difference they were not having a sweet married life. An important event occurs on a journey which Mohanlal and Lakshmi takes by train. Mohanlal makes her sit in the general compartment and arrange his seat in the first-class compartment, which is meant for the British. There he sees two British soldiers who tries to abuse him. When the arrogant Mohanlal tries to oppose them, he is thrown out of the train. He can only look as the train engines starts up and the train leaves the platform. This short story is a very good example of how even the richer Indians were treated, and a sign of racism between the British and the Indians. While Macaulay, who was a British poet, historian and politician, and his like-minded saw all humans as fundamentally identical, Kipling, who was a British writer and poet, and his like-minded saw deep and almost insurmountable differences between the Indians and the Europeans. In some cases, the British saw the differences as biological, and so you can talk about how the empire's ideology was racist.
Divide and rule means that you divide the population into smaller groups and make it impossible for them to come together and fight against the authority. This technique involves creating or encouraging divisions among the subjects to prevent alliances that could challenge the authority, and aiding and promoting those who are willing to cooperate with the authority. This strategy was used in many different ways by empires seeking to expand their territories. It took the British 75 years to conquer most of India. The conquest can't be explained by the Indians' lack of technology or knowledge of warfare, but they saw the advantage by having the British on their side. For example, the British had control over the ocean and the supply of silver. It made way for the influence of the British in India as their trade partners or tax collectors. The British could offer security in exchange for trading goods, and the British had military advantage, especially when it came to the troops' discipline. There wasn't really a plan or long-term politics strategy behind the conquest. The official British policy was to create good conditions for the trade market. It was first around the 1800s, because of the conflict with France, that the British introduced a conscious and continuous policy to maintain and divide territory in India. The British were afraid of Napoleon, and the campaign in Egypt in 1798 threatened Britain's Indian possessions. Earlier, there had been claimed that there was a connection between the Industrial Revolution in UK and the capture of India. The connection should be that the British, after the industrialization, needed markets where they could sell the cotton textiles produced in Manchester's factories. That's why they captured India and they outperformed the Indians' craft-based textile production. The British don't even have the idea to divide and rule India. Rather, they fought to introduce the politics to India in an attempt to stand stronger against the French Empire. The British only thought about war and power, as powerful countries do.
The question is if the Indians were able to obtain what the British developed and came with on their own, or if they would have stayed a less developed country as they were before. Because even though the British introduced India to the civilized world, the work is yet to be done and India is still suffering. And even though the work was effective, it still had a lot of flaws. So while they gave them more modern technology, communication system, and an increase in population and standard of living, they also led India to famine and dependency on Britain.